All right, live. We're gonna take a few moments. There is a 20-second delay. I would like to point out, as I state, that there's a 20-second delay. That I am on an Apple product. That's a bit of our pettiness in our rivalry. I'm really on a serious live. You really gonna just put your head in there? You talking on that book? I apologize ahead of time. Y'all know my kids have no filter and really don't care if I'm doing something serious. Tonight we are live and a professional live, so this is not one of the ones where I'm fussing and cussing. I've kind of shared with you all in some of my rants about a person that is housed at the Alachua County Jail and how upset I was because first of all, did not be at the jail. But in addition to that, the assistance that they've been trying to get with people and staff that work at the jail has been little to none. So I thought the best way, in order to actually highlight what is going on, to bring attention to how this is a systems issue and to really get the justice for this young man, but also for others, is by bringing this young man's family on to be able to tell their story themselves. They wanted to do a traditional press conference over in front of the sheriff's office of the jail after speaking with people. And then with them trying to maintain their lives, we understand a greater value of the virtual press conference, the ability for you all to know and understand what the call to actions are and why they are those call to actions that are needed and necessary. So, of course, for everybody pretty much knows me, but if you don't, I'm Shanae Jackson. They call me the accidental activist. Y'all know I just like to be the community troublemaker. And I take ownership of that is because people try to demean me for that. But I've come to realize that that is the only way to get any substantive change. We'll start at the top of the screen. Each person is just going to introduce themselves and then their relationship to the young man. I haven't said his name because I'm not sure if they're comfortable with sharing that. So I will allow them to do so. So we'll start with his mom, Miss Troy McDuffie.
Hi, my name is Troy McDuffie. My son name is Courtney Smith. He's been currently held at the Alachua County Jail. Courtney is a good young man, nonviolent, and he's always had a good heart for people, especially children and elderly people. He is really quiet, laid back, and as I said, nonviolent. I don't know. He has his challenges, as we all do, but for the most of it, he's a good young man. Now, I received a call from his fiance. He was booked into the jail on March 7th, 2022. I received a call from her that he called finally and expressed that he had been abused there, beaten. So that's when I came into play. So I don't know if she wants to share with you all after the phone call.
I'm Tamara, Courtney's fiance.
Before we get to you, we're gonna go with Vaughn.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Vaughn. I'm the sister of Courtney Smith. He is now housed in Alachua County Jail, where he was beaten by numerous of Alachua County correctional officers while being handcuffed at the wrist and shackled at his ankles. Should Tam go ahead and explain how it began?
Okay, so I'm Tamara, his fiance. So on March 7th, 2022, I called Meridian in reference to a mental health crisis that Courtney was having, and they referred me to the Alachua County non-emergency number and told me to call for a co-responder or a CIT. I did call and they met me at the house. They came out. They ended up taking him in for some other reasons. when they took him in, they told I never received a call from him until Thursday. I went to his first appearance on Tuesday the 8th. They told the court, the Alachua County Jailhouse told the court that he did not come to first appearance due to him refusing to get dressed. And the judge went ahead and, did what she needed to do with the case. I never received a call from him Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning at 8:27 a.m. He called me crying, stating that he had been beaten and choked unconscious. And while all that was taking place, he was handcuffed and shackled. He stated that while he was unconscious, in the process of coming to, he could hear them saying, "Is he dead?" and checking for a pulse. And he said they popped his left shoulder out of place to where one of the correction officers kept saying that he thought it was broken or he was going to break it. And he felt like his ribs on his left side was broken. He said it felt like they put a wet towel or something around his neck and put something around his neck to choke. To choke him. And he said this is the reason why he wasn't at first appearance, because they were hiding him, that they tased him so many times that he bit down on his tongue and his tongue was swollen to the point that he couldn't hardly swallow. I was able to go see him Thursday evening, or I believe Thursday or Friday evening, and everything that he did tell me on the phone, as far as his marks and his bruises were there. His tongue did have bite marks, excessive bite marks on them. He had excessive tase marks on his back and his side. His right eye was black with cut marks around it. And he had all kinds of marks on him that was, pretty much the same as what he had told me. And it just, his picture wasn't up until Thursday. And when he left the house Monday to go to jail, when they took him in, he had nothing on him. And in his picture, he had his black eye. So, something happened. It's just uncalled for.
Tim, I know this is very difficult for you to share, but I would like to back up so that people that are listening in can understand how he ended up at the jail. What took place for you to call to trying to get help at Meridian?
Because we had an incident in our house. Well, we had an incident that started in Orlando, and he ended up staying up all night while we were out of town, and he didn't sleep, and he didn't take his medication, one of his medications he hadn't taken for his mental health. And he did consume alcohol, which he shouldn't had. And there was some misunderstanding and miscommunication, and by the time we got home, there were a lot of people here that him nor myself knew about, and they kind of bum rushed our car, and I guess it scared him and put him in panic mode, and he came in the house, and they were just kind of just rushing him and wanting questions and asking all kind of things, and like it was, to me, I can understand their concern, but at the same time I can understand how it threw him into the state of mind that it threw him in, given his situation, his past situation. And
Who were the people that bum rushed him? Is this the law enforcement when you called, or
no,
was this?
it was my younger son's dad and my older son and my sister from out of town and my son's wife, and it was just my family because of miscommunication on my middle child's part. So that's why I said it was just all misunderstanding and miscommunication. Had it been communicated properly, that things could have been handled differently. So when
Law
everybody,
enforcement was Courtney aggressive? What was
no,
like?
he wasn't aggressive at all. When they got here, he was sitting on the couch and I walked in with them. It was two officers. At first they thought they might need backup, and they called for it. But then when they realized that he was not aggressive, they canceled it. He got up and then on the couch, and then he sat down in front of the other officer and was talking to the officer because he thought he was just going to go to Meridian because he knew he was so, like, I guess his mental health had gotten so out of control, and he was so, he thought people were surrounding the house. He thought the people that were here that Sunday were surrounding the house and they were out to get him. So he literally would not move off of the couch.
Okay. And so when you attempted to call Meridian, they referred you and stated to call law enforcement for a co-responder.
Yes.
Is that correct? And then when you
Yes.
called for the co-responder, what were you told?
They told me that they would send somebody out.
Okay.
And they told me to meet him out there because I was at work. So I left work and met him out here.
So I want to take a moment just to explain for people that are actually listening in. The reason that this part is so important because it speaks to larger systems. So as many people know, when I'm on my rants, one of the things that I'm always talking about is when you show up into these meetings, how everybody is always talking about how wonderful their department or organization is in these wonderful programs that we have. And my frustration is even when we're having other people that are seeking services, even throughout social media, the first thing that I see people say is, well, oh, just call Meridian. And I want to point out one thing is that Meridian is good for what Meridian is good for. But number one, there's not enough access for enough people in order to be served. Number two, Meridian itself can be very isolating and much like someone being incarcerated, which is not beneficial. Additional, this co-responder program, you hear GPD often talk about their co-responder program and how wonderful it is. Typically in any department, it's like two people that's supposed to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we understand that there is, and a co-responder typically is a mental health trained professional that goes out on calls where there seems to be mental health issues, where there doesn't seem to be any threat or danger. I want to point this out because there's a disconnect in communication and a disconnect in what's happening. So people receiving these services understand that there is a gap and that these wonderful programs that people talk about actually don't work because they're not available at the time that people need them the most. They're not co-responders that are available in the middle of the night. They're not co-responders that are available on the weekend. Well, typically when people have mental health crises, it's something that might have triggered them in the middle of the night. It could be on the weekend, or even in Courtney's scenario, he may have had alcohol even at a time that it may not have. And even before we go into, oh, well, he shouldn't have been drinking alcohol, I'm going to have his sister to come in just a moment and talk about how Courtney came to be diagnosed and factors and things that are in his life. But additionally, we want to talk about there's what's called a central intake. And this facility is where people that with known mental health issues or suspected mental health issues are supposed to be able to go be evaluated and then determine if they can go to crisis stabilization before actually going to the jail if they have to. I want to be upfront and candid with the people that are here. The reason that Courtney was arrested is because when he stood up off of the couch, there was Molly that was on the couch in his vicinity or up under him. And I'm clear on this. I'm not stating that there might not have should have been a follow-up to figure out what was going on with Molly. It's not for us to argue that particular point. But if a person is in mental health crisis, stabilizing that crisis should be what is first. We all know and are aware that even with this culture at the jail, this has been going on for more upwards of a decade. And so I was able to point out and highlight that over the last few years, how this is a long-term culture. And this is a culture that is going to take some time to be dismantled. But part of the reason that it's not being dismantled is because we, as a society and as a community, we're not applying pressure where we should be. In places that we should apply pressure is even prior to this. Courtney, having known and proven mental health issues, should not have gone to jail first. He absolutely should have gone through central intake, especially that's when his family called, especially when they called Meridian, which is people always say, I want you to know too, when correspondents go out, typically that's what they do, is they give the family a list of resources, and on that resource is Meridian. And so I want to make sure that I lay that out even before we get into how we got to that particular night. I want to also point out to people who are not familiar with the law, the officers that came that night, they could have written it up and sent it to the state attorney for the state attorney to decide if charges would be filed proceeding forward as it related to Courtney. He did not have to go to jail that night. And I want to point that out because a lot of people don't understand how the system works, and they just roll with whatever law enforcement says, or they roll with whatever entity says that they're doing a great job. And I want to point out that Courtney is not the exception. This is a norm. I tell you all the time, that's how I got involved in this, is because every time you wake up, you're addressing these scenarios. Since me speaking with Courtney's family, there have been 7 people that have come forward. And this is not counting all the people that I highlighted when Shady Sadie was still in office, where they were attacked in the jail, either by officers or by other people housed in the jail that officers put up to attack them. And we're going to get to that because some of this has happened with Courtney too. I would like Courtney's sister, Vaughn, to actually speak to us and help us to understand how Courtney came to be diagnosed and things that might have occurred or factors in his life. And even when we're talking about drinking and things like that. And I tell you all this because whenever I hear a person that might use drugs or might drink, that's because they're trying to cope with a traumatic event or experience. And if we start to look at it in that way, we will start to approach it in a different manner. I'm Vaughn.
Okay, can't hear you.
Can you hear us? We can.
Okay, yes, I can hear now.
So can you hear? We're just asking you to tell us about Courtney, what traumatic events or things that may have occurred for him to get to a mental health diagnosis.
Okay. My brother's mental illness began after him and a friend were taken hostage at someone's home. They fought to get away, and once Courtney got outside to warn his friend that they needed to leave because someone in the home was trying to kill them, he noticed that the friend's brains had been blown out on the dashboard. So that caused a few mental illness issues that he's going through, along with PTSD and bipolar. So little things, he also has anxiety. So little things do trigger that moment. And at times he may sit as if he's in a catatonic state, reliving and speaking of things that happened that day. But when he's doing that, it's not that he's violent. He's just sitting down, speaking out loud, reminiscing about what went on that day when his friend was murdered. So basically what triggered that off with the disagreement that took place at Courtney's girlfriend's home among family members, that triggered that off with his anxiety with being bombarded by so many people at that time. He thought maybe someone was trying to set him up or try to kill him. And it wasn't that he got violent. It was just that Tam called the police department thinking that they would help him and transport him to get the mental care treatment that he needed because he had ran out of his prescription refills. So once Courtney got up to comply with the officers, they saw that the drug street name Molly was sitting on the couch, which could have belonged to anyone because they didn't personally get it off of Courtney's body, but they assumed that it was his. And instead of them taking him to get that mental care treatment that he needed, they put him in jail. They placed him in jail. My mom notified me once Courtney's booking picture was released for the public to see on the Alachua County's jail site that her and the girlfriend noticed that Courtney had a black eye. The black eye was not there at the time of arrest. Now, at the time that the officers did arrest Courtney, he did leave with no shirt on. And that was just about it. Courtney was walking fine. There was no type of physical bruises on him, no swollen tongue, no blackened eye. And if Courtney was any harm, then the officers that were dispatched would not have canceled their backup. On March 11th, I called the Alachua County Jail, and I originally spoke with Officer James, and I asked him, why was my brother beaten while handcuffed and shackled by numerous Alachua County correctional officers? 9 correctional officers beat, tased him, choked him unconscious, kicked him, and mocked him. Once I spoke with Sergeant West, he told me that excessive force was used and it had to be used by 3 or so correction officers. I asked him, what is his definition of or so? He told me to give him a moment so that he can look at the report. And he came back on the phone and stated again, it was 3 or so officers. And I asked him, is that personal confidential information that you can't give me? What is your or so? Is your or so 5, 7, 9, 10? What is your or so? So he never stated exactly how many officers used excessive force on Courtney, but he did tell me that excessive force had to be used because Courtney refused to take the pictures for his booking photo. Courtney refused to also do the fingerprinting and the medical screening. It's so much with this. Wait a moment. He stated that Courtney tried to run out of the cell because Courtney stated that on the camera that was inside of the booking holding cell that he saw lights and that aliens were coming. But that was a lie. What Courtney did, he began to run out of the cell to ask another officer for help, feeling as if she would be able to relate to him as being a black man with her being a minority woman. This was Captain Keith. So it makes sense now while Courtney ran to the cell screaming. It wasn't that Courtney was trying to get out. It was that he was asking Captain Keith, are you going to let them do this to me? I could be your brother or your son. But to her, it was very funny and entertaining. My mother spoke to her and she acted as if it was her first time hearing that story, knowing that she was the one of the officers that were on the scene outside of the jail cell and allowed it to happen. This happened on Sergeant West's watch as well, as he told me. I find it just amuses me that Sergeant West stated that once he got home, he called the 6 a.m. shift to check on Courtney because while he was there, Courtney wasn't sleeping. How many correctional officers actually go home and call up the next shift to inquire about a inmate sleeping details? It wasn't that they were calling for Courtney's sleeping details. Sergeant West, I believe, called because he knew the condition that Courtney was in before he clocked home that day. He knew Courtney's tongue was swollen to the point he couldn't eat. He knew Courtney's eye was closed shut and blackened. He knew he had been tased. He knew that as Courtney laid on his stomach, that they were on top of his back, pulling his head back and choking him and kicking him to the point many times Courtney played dead as if he was dead. He played as if he was dead so that they can stop beating him. So this is why Sergeant West called to check on Courtney, to make sure he was still breathing. As far as I'm concerned, it wasn't that he cared about if Courtney had gotten any type of rest. I also spoke with the classification manager. I was told that she's the backup classification manager, Miss Roberson Smith. I told her that it's been daily that my brother has continuously been requesting and asking for the HIPAA and grievance form. She told me that they would need to hear that from Courtney's mouth and not mine. He would ask for these grievance forms and HIPAA forms daily to be told to him by different officers, one of them being Officer Cam. Officer Cam stated to Courtney, why do you want the grievance form? Because my supervisor wants to know. That's his right. That's why he wants it. And to this day, he still doesn't have it. He still hasn't been sent out for medical care at a hospital. I fought the nurse for that. She should have used a better judgment on knowing that.
Vaughn. So I want to take a pause one moment for the people that are listening. And so one of the ways that so as she's speaking, the HIPAA form is a form that I talk to people often when these cases come up. And so I'm taking this moment. If you have a loved one that is incarcerated, whether it is in the Alachua County Jail, in a Florida State prison, in a federal prison, I want you, whoever is listening in, to relay that information. Get a HIPAA form on file. And the reason you want the HIPAA form, because that is the form that we can get the release of his medical records. And so the difficulty is they have a loved one that is now in the Alachua County Jail that no one can get access to. So I have a few friends that are pastors that have reached out, and they're already approved to go into the jail to be able to go see Courtney. They're being denied that. Courtney has had multiple visits that have been denied so that the family can't see him. They pulled down they didn't put up his booking picture photo for 4 days. Then when they finally put it up, they have moved Courtney's pod where he was housed to another one. And we're going to get to what actually happened there. Additionally, and he's entitled to ask for that. And so I'm asking people to do it proactively, because we often end up in cases like this. We're able to see what is going on with his medical care. We're able to see if they did what they were supposed to do by documenting his injuries had we had that form. Right now, they've had weeks to be able to do whatever it is that they want when it comes to his medical records, because no one can get access and they're stonewalling with the form. Additionally, it is a person that is housed at the jail. It is the right to file a grievance. It is a right to file to ask for that paperwork. When they finally did attempt to give Courtney the grievance form, they gave it to him without a pencil. And so those are those subtle things. The reason that we know about this level of diligence is because when I came aboard with the family, those are the two things that I asked them to get immediately. And those are the conversations that we've had every single day. So every interaction that they have with Courtney, they're aware. We also are very clear that people at the jail listen to the phone calls. And we know this because I've told you about cases of people who really have been innocent, and they've taken what they've said and sent it over to the state attorney and other places to turn it against them. We know that they listen to the calls for every other thing. So they are aware that Courtney's family has been very diligent about what is going on. They're very aware that I'm involved, and I myself am asking the family every single day for them to get these things. And so the reason that we're highlighting this is because we often make assumptions, because we want to trust the entities, and we want to trust that people that are paid to do particular jobs are working to do those well. I want to interject before she goes even further to state to you, I still have connections within that jail, and people within that jail that were present at work during that event or that came after the fact are very clear that Sergeant West escalated this situation. Sergeant West is the person that antagonized Courtney, and they even state he may have said things that they didn't like, but this was something that was wholly and purposefully conducted by Sergeant West. They've been very clear that Sergeant West states that he's not worried about any of my videos, and anything that is going on is because he's friends with internal affairs, and that they're going to clear him of any wrongdoing because that they're friends. And so this is, and y'all know me, I'm going to always come with the receipts. I'm going to always be clear. One point of reference is with the family in Courtney's position is that Captain Keith was a person that was there laughing. By accounts, Captain Keith is the person that finally told them, y'all can't leave him out here like this. Y'all need to clean him up and get him back in the cell appropriately. And y'all know me. So as I convey things, I'm going to convey things in the manner in which they should be. It was made very clear that it's the same band of officers, that this is their culture. They laugh about the things that they do, and that the next step is what they did. They reassigned Courtney to a different pod because they wanted to escalate a situation with another person that's housed in the jail. I want to remind you all of Devontae Gardner. Remember, Devontae Gardner was a young man that had mental health issues. The pods that they were in was supposed to be 1-to-1. He was attacked by another person in the jail that ultimately led to his death. Remember, at that time, we had to raise money for his burial expenses because under Sadie Darnell, at that time, they even refused to bury him. And they finally sent him out for medical treatment once he was already near brain dead. I want to point this out because there are policies, and these are things that we're asking for. So even for the number of you all, I have a list of 22 people that are willing to help with public records. And so right now, I didn't do the public records request. I have other people to do the request on where to start. We're being very deliberate because we know, and not at the sheriff's office, but in all entities, they're being trained to minimize the amount of information that they give us. They're being very meticulous to omit what it is. So you have to be very strategic. We also are aware that if I ask for public records, they're going to be a bit more diligent. And so I'm never clear on what exactly it is that I'm looking for. And we ask for records in a manner that you can't just innately understand what it is that I'm looking for and I'm digging for. But I'm very specific and systematic with that. I want to reiterate as we go into things that have happened since I've been involved, since the family has spoken with, the additional chains of command, the additional people that they have communicated with as it relates to this. But I want to highlight, as you're taking all of this in, this didn't start at the jail. This failure started with Meridian. This failure started with lack of resources for co-responder programs. This failure started even before Courtney moved to Alachua County. He is currently on probation for misuse of 911. He was having a mental health crisis. He called 911 excessively. And instead of getting him the help that he needs, they arrested him and put him on probation to further perpetuate this cycle. And so as I talk to you about cycles, I can talk very abstractly, but this is a family's case and scenario. He never would have been put in the position to be brutalized at the jail had we had better systems and better ways of doing things in place. I want to remind you all, I got on here and I still get moved. I have a friend, his name was James Thompson, who is a community activist who jumped off the parking garage at Shands because they told him the only way he would get the mental health services that he needed is if he needed to go to the jail and then go through the process of an attorney trying to advocate for him because Meridian was unable to help him. So, and James is a white man. So let me be clear, and a white man that wielded a great amount of power, and right now with a community that's feeling a great sense of loss. So imagine Courtney's position, a person that's not from Alachua County, that is here, minding his own business. His family did what they could, attempting to get him help, and they're subjected with the guilt of knowing their attempts to get him help is what put him in a position to be brutalized. So I want that to resonate with you. Now, I'm not sure which of you would like to proceed forward, but to talk additionally, now, since people have been involved, since you've been talking to Courtney to address some of the things that have been going on, even past that point.
Well, he was taken from infirmary into a pod, and from there on Wednesday, he was moved from I can't hear you.
Haven't said anything.
Oh, okay, I saw your lips. I'm sorry. On Wednesday, he was moved from a pod that he was originally placed into after being released from the infirmary. On Wednesday, and within hours, as Courtney is sitting on the toilet using the restroom, doing the number 2 to be exact, all of a sudden there's other inmates that began to crowd around him while he's using the restroom. Next thing you know, he hears a code being called on the intercom. I'm not quite sure if it was code red or whatever. Once the correctional officers get there, one of them mentions to Courtney and other inmates, "Oh, you guys are over here fighting." And they stated no, that no one was fighting. So the officer said that he was going to have the surveillance video checked to see if they were fighting. And if they were fighting, that they will be placed in the hole for 30 days with no phone calls and no visits. And see, that's what they mainly don't want Courtney to have, is those visits or phone calls. Another officer comes and says, "Oh, don't bother watching the video. I personally saw them fighting," which is all lies. How can Courtney be fighting someone while sitting on the toilet using the restroom? He was also sitting on the toilet when they arrived. So they chose Courtney out of all the inmates that were gathered around him as being one of the inmates that were fighting. They chose Courtney along with another inmate that did not fight Courtney. So I don't know if that inmate was given an initiative to lie, or if they also have it out for that inmate as well. Courtney was supposed to have a hearing on Saturday for the DR disciplinary write-up for that incident that never really took place at all. This is something that was fabricated. As far as him having a fight with another inmate, they told him that it was possible that they can take him to this hearing between 2 and 3 in the morning. I don't know if that's protocol, but it sounds mighty suspicious to me that they would wake him up at that hour to have a hearing. To this day, Courtney still has not had the hearing that was supposed to take place on this past Saturday. Did you all want to continue to talk?
So I wanted to point out as well, for other things to help highlight. So I know people are wondering why this situation escalated, and what was told to me internally is that Sergeant West wanted Courtney to be processed. And so what is supposed to happen is medical is supposed to come in and determine, they can make the call on whether Courtney should be processed or not. And so instead of West allowing for medical, understanding that this person had a mental health crisis. And I want to be clear, because even many people, the first thing you're going to say is, oh, they need training. This is not about training at all. Some stuff is basic common sense. And it is basic common sense that if you had a person that came in for a reported mental health issue, because that's actually denoted in the minimum, so they're clear of that, that even if they don't want to be processed, you don't have to be adequately trained in mental health to leave people the hell alone. And I have to state it in just that manner. So I want to be clear. I told you all about another case of a young man that was beaten in the jail during first appearance. And when he was beaten so badly, he was yelling for help so loudly that there was a judge out of Baker County that asked him to close the door. So lets you know that this is normal. And I want you to know that many of the incidences that I know, they took place well under Sadie Darnell. So I want you to know that culture has permeated over into the new administration. For me, it is very important that the new administration really takes ownership of what is going on at the jail and invite us in for true solutions, because we are not okay. When I'm speaking with this family and they've emailed all the way up to the top and they're not getting the response, when I reach out and all I keep being told is, well, we're looking into it, it don't take that much time to look into it. It didn't take that much time to release that footage of Erica Thompson having her baby in the jail where they spice it all together. It does not take that long in order to provide video. And so we're going to let them finish, because even some of the concerns of Courtney's family is even how his medication and things like that are being administered. And I would definitely want for them to be able to discuss that and be able to address to you all why his medication regimen and the things that are being done are so important. Because we want to point out that the jail has a contract with a new contractor for medical services. We had issues with Horizon, but if we need to actually take a look at this new one, we need to do that as well. So being mindful of what's going on around us and understanding the big picture. And Ms. Troy, I know when we did chat, his medication and the medication schedule was a major point of concern. So if you want to share that.
Yes, his medication is narcotics. They're not PRN medications. And as for a nurse, it should be a time schedule that he takes his medication. He's constantly asking for the medication, but the nurse is constantly telling him that she's busy. So he gets his medication off schedule. 12 o'clock midnight, she wakes him up and asks him, do he want his medication? And of course, he says, yes, he wants his medication, but he should have had his medication, not at 12 o'clock midnight. And this is the problem, because the medication is not consistent with the time and it throws him off. If he's not getting his medication scheduled, that's a problem. It's not a PRN medication.
And the sad thing is, it's only been since he's been in the infirmary, which it's right there.
And half of the days, he don't even get the medication. A couple of times he said that he's never received his medications. It's been one day he gets it, one day he don't, one day he get it, one day he don't. And that's not the way it should be. If that medication is prescribed for him to have it every 6 or 12 hours, it should be on a schedule. It is a narcotic. It's not a PRN. It's not a Tylenol, something that he has to ask for. The nurse should automatically know when his medication is scheduled and she needs to give it. And she's not doing that. And to me, that's a problem that throws him off from the medication being in his system is very important.
And
I he's concerned about his medication.
It's purposely done to trigger him. So they can get some type of reaction. That's why that's done.
And even I want to
because it doesn't make sense that he's missing all these doses of medication that he's prescribed to get. When first appearance, the judge asked his fiance to go to the pharmacist and get the prescription medication that he's on, have the pharmacist to sign the paper, bring it back so that we can make sure that he's getting it. So at this point, if the judge has ordered for her to go get it, she took out the time to do it, why can't they give him the medication?
Absolutely. I want to point out for people who may not have a medical background, or the way that medications work is when they're prescribed, they're most effective if they're done. So let's say if you have to take a medicine 3 times a day, then that means you take it every 8 hours. You have what's called a half-life. So that might mean you have 30 minutes before or 30 minutes after. So there's a window that the medication should be actually taken in. If the medication is not taken within those windows, it actually reduces the effectiveness, and depending upon the medication and the gap in them, upwards of 30 to 40%. And so these are basic things that anyone who's housed at the jail should be entitled to. These are also other instances and other allegations that have been clearly made where even with medical staff, they're not getting the appropriate treatment. Additionally, we want to point out that with this family, they've been very diligent on asking and begging for Courtney to go out and be actually seen at a physical hospital, and that never happened. And that's one of the things that I raised holy hell about when Shady Sadie was in office. At that time, they had someone who had no medical background who was the person that determines if a person should go to the hospital or not. The deal is, we know that especially when a person is beaten, there are many internal injuries. I don't even remember if you all remember Mark Burkett, which is a classmate of ours that died back in the jail some years ago. He was beaten and tased and he died in the jail. There have been other instances of people that have been beaten in the jail that have died and supposed suicides in the jail. And while this is before this administration, we need to highlight that this is a culture. I also want to talk about figureheads. So while the sheriff is the person that also is over the jail as well, it is very difficult because of the culture of law enforcement for everybody to get the information that they should have and also to move accordingly. There's a wealth of information that has been shared, that has been verified and been validated information. But in order for me to fully share that information, I need to be able to have records to build that case so it's not traced back to the people who shared it, because that's the kind of culture that we have within the ranks and within parameters. Even when it comes to, and I'm not sure who's making the determination for promotions, but when we also talk about that as well, from feedback from the people at the jail who actually, this is the work and the thing that they do and they actually care about it, out of the promotions that were done, only 1 out of the 5 were actually good decisions as it related to promotions. They would share with me that even to a Sergeant West, his mom works up under him and under his zones, which is a direct violation of policy. And see, these are the kinds of things that are going on. And so if it's been shared with me that Sergeant West's mom works there and is getting all of these excessive hours and the ability to do that, that means there's other things that are going on at the jail, appropriate and improper, that everybody's turning a blind eye. And so when they're turning a blind eye to who's working under who and nepotism and these types of things, they're all turning a blind eye when people are being viciously attacked. this is not anything that's new, but this is a time that we must address it. And so what I'm asking for you all is there is call to actions. Each family member has questions that they want answered. So we're going to allow them to go around and have those questions answered. And then we'll talk to you about what call to actions are before we get off. Who would like to start?
Mhm. Start with questions. Mama, go ahead. Start with your questions.
For the call of action.
No, your three questions. With your questions that you said you had.
Okay, my first question is, my concern is, why is Courtney not getting his medication as scheduled on time? The second question is, why did she not report the nurse when he came into the infirmary on March 7th? Why did she not report the condition and state that he came in? He came in, they brought him in a wheelchair after the beating. So the trauma and the beating and all was visible. And to me, she didn't report it, and she should have at least called emergency to have him sit down. And I want to know why, as a nurse, that she did not do that. It's her job to report any type of abuse or neglect. He came into the infirmary with those bruises. Her question should have been to them, how did this occur?
Absolutely. And before the
Period.
next persons give their questions, I wanted to point out another thing that took place. They pulled Courtney out and took him to the infirmary the other day. His attorney, which is the public defender, in to speak with him. And we all know that even when attorneys call, number one, they're not supposed to listen to the phone calls. Well, they refused to allow Courtney to speak with his attorney privately, although he asked that and told him that he was required to speak to his public defender on speakerphone. And so we're pointing these things out because that's a huge deal as it relates to any case, but then also when we're talking about fear tactics and intimidation. So there are rights that Courtney is being told that he has, and those rights are being boldly violated.
Mhm.
Okay, Tim, I got that. Okay, Vaughn, would you like to go next?
Yes. I would like to know, when will Courtney be sent to the hospital for medical care? And once he's sent out, will he be transported by the same correctional officers that beat him, and also the same correction officers that did not physically beat him, but they have been intimidating on a daily basis? We have an officer, Diaz, that told him that he's going to be sorry. This was since he's been in infirmary. We want to know, what does he mean by that? He asked Courtney, is Courtney suicidal? So that makes us feel as if they're going to try to murder him and make it seem like a suicide. Courtney is not suicidal, and he stated that to this officer Diaz. My other question is, why didn't the backup classification case manager, Miss Robertson Smith, make sure that Courtney received the HIPAA and grievance forms once I talked with her? And the other is, why did Sergeant West allow the numerous of Alachua County correctional officers to use excessive force on Courtney while he was handcuffed at the wrist and shackled at his ankles? This happened on Sergeant West's watch and on his shift. Why was that allowed?
And I
You
also
can go
want to point
ahead.
that has been reported as well that the incidents of excessive force have increased over the last few months under a few officers, and Sergeant West is one of those officers. And so, as we're talking about public records requests, we're going to request. And so, the reason I'm not giving the names of other officers and the reason I'm being very vague about public records requests is because, as you all know, I have an arsenal of public records. And so, as I go back, there are names that we keep hearing that came up 2 years ago when they were working under Shady Sadie. And so being able to, number one, compare to ensure that the same records that I have match the new stuff that we're getting, but then also that if we know that there is a pattern of the same officers being involved in incidents, we need to understand what standing operating procedures are and what is actually being done about this in order to create change. The fact that they are still so very bold, even under new administration, means that we have to dig deeper and we have to work harder in order to dismantle what's going on there. Now, Tim, I did want to give you a moment before we do the call to action. I understand that that is Courtney that's on the phone, but did you want to ask your questions before we hopped off?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was telling him to call me back.
Okay.
My questions were just like, why are all my video visits unavailable with Courtney? It seems that all of my video visits with him, his in particular, are unavailable. I've contacted Securus. I've contacted Mr. Whaley at the jail because he's the one in charge of them. Courtney's he said, I guess, a request to get it checked, and him nor myself have gotten any response. And it's been like that since he's been in there, and we've been able to do visits. I've had to get a refund. Secure says it's not them. The jail swears it's not them. Courtney says that it's telling him his number's already in use. So something's going on. And he says that he watches people get on the same video thing that his was on, and they get on and it works right away for him. So I don't know if it's intentional or what's going on, but something's going on. So I'm only, I don't know. It's just not right. And then I also want to know when the Alachua County correction officers are going to be held accountable for, what they did to Courtney.
Absolutely. I want to bring this point home before we go into the call to actions. Additionally, one of the frustrations is because, many of us, the first thing they say is, oh, well, it's a lawsuit, they're going to sue. Well, for the traditional lawsuit, and the jail has been very smart with that. The way in which they assess damages is by being able to prove the amount of injury that Courtney has. So their refusal to send him out to the hospital to get that assessed, it seems very willful. I mean, it could be me, it could be a coincidence, but typically, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And so the further away that they get from people being able to see his injuries, the reason that pastors that typically can come in and see anyone can't see him, the reason that he has limited access to anything, whether it's video visits or any of that, is so anyone can minimize the documentation of his injuries. It was not until they alleged that he had an incident with another person housed at the jail that they even stated they were taking him to the infirmary to check out his arm. And he reports that even at that time they didn't. It leads me to believe, and I could be wrong, but I'm not wrong often, that you're now trying to be able to state that his injuries came from this other alleged altercation. And that's my deal. The deal is if there is nothing to hide and he came to the point that he had to be transported to the infirmary by wheelchair, why wouldn't you proactively send him out in order to protect you, in order to protect every member of people in the shifts on the jail? Like, to me, this is not rocket science, but it seems to be very difficult all of a sudden. And so when you're even talking about lawsuits, what has to happen now is looking at this on a larger scale as a federal suit, where you're establishing a pattern over years. So not even just under this administration. So I want to be clear that this is a systems issue. So the reason I'm asking people to come forward with their stories, and I appreciate those of you who have furnished videos and those types of things, is to be able to build this case to understand that this seems like these are federal issues. We can say what we want to say all day long, and we can have the jail to look into the jail, because that's what the jail administrator will tell you. But I am one that never trusts the police to investigate the police. That's like me investigating myself, and I'm pretty straightforward and honest. I'm still going to make sure that I shine or look like a bed of roses or mitigate or minimize any level of responsibility. I want you all to understand this is not just about the jail. It's the school board. It's the city of Gainesville. It's Alachua County. The way the organizations work is, think about any company that you work for and you've been mistreated and you go to HR, and the first thing that human resources does is try to figure out what you did wrong instead of trying to address what your issue is. Because at the end of the day, their responsibility is to protect their entity first. So the way that we protect the people in our community is we come together and protect them first. And we move with the same level of diligence and the same level of coordination. So now we're going to have each family member to give you basic things that they believe are helpful. And then, of course, I'll give you specific call to actions.
All right, Mom, do y'all want me to do it?
I didn't hear it.
Call to action.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay, I'm
I'm
gonna
just
go ahead
asking
with the
that
call.
any family member whose family member is housed in any jail, not just Alachua County, to reach out to your family member, check on them, put money on the phone, no matter what they're there for or what they've done. You should always try to have contact to find out if they're okay, if they need anything, what is going on. So I'm just asking the families and mothers, and some people don't have mothers or family members, to come together and check on your loved ones. Don't just let them sit there with nobody to call, nobody to turn to, and you don't know what's going on with them until it's too late.
Tim.
Go ahead. I'm good.
Well, my call to action is basically what my mother said. I'm asking all family members and supporters of currently housed inmates and inmates in Alachua County Jail, whether it be the men's facility or the women's facility, or both, to check on their loved ones. Write a letter, put money on the phone so that they may call you. Schedule an in-person or video visit with your loved ones housed at Alachua County jails. I challenge you to be their voice if they need you. You may be sitting at home today with your freedom, but anything can happen and put you in the same position that they reside in right now. You are beaten and abused. You would want someone to help you. I also ask you all to please make phone calls and emails and write letters to editorials. I've reached out to city commissioners, haven't heard anything from them, as well as some of the mega churches and NAACP, and haven't heard anything. But the call of action is basically to please reach out to your loved ones to see if they need you right now at this time, if they've ever been beaten or if they're being beaten at this present moment.
And so I want to point out, we're going to finish it up with what Vaughn stated. She reached out to our entities. She reached out to the NAACP. She reached out to city commissioners, and has got limited response. And that's the reason that it's our responsibility. It is our responsibility, and I tell you this all the time, number one, to elect people that are in office, but number two, to hold them accountable once they're there. We have to keep that same energy. Over and over, I've yelled to the rooftops. People that get housed in the jail, they're still people. We wanted Kiki to be able to speak. I think he's just been in a bad area, so he's bouncing in and off. He's been a major, major support to the family as well. He's been a great resource. He's been an additional person that's been trying to help them to migrate and navigate through this in order to get assistance, and they've not been getting that. And I need us all to know and understand that this is because it's all of our responsibility. This is not just the responsibility of the sheriff, even though the jail might fall under the sheriff. And I think that's the whole deal, and the disconnect was with Sadie as well. It is, but then you have people that are over there. You're putting people in place that you trust, and they double cross you. We understand that too. Other people in other offices, whether it's the city and the county, everybody wants to be so polite and respectable. And their deal is, if anybody has to be ignored or disregarded, it's the one that's housed in that jail. But every person in that jail belongs to someone, and that is the manner in which you have to view it. If you look like me, it easily could be one of us. You all know the story of my son. It easily could have been him had I not been his mom. And not that he did anything major enough. In their minds, they claimed he was driving too fast in a school zone, only for us to learn that there was not a school zone active. My son absolutely would have been arrested that day had I not gotten to the scene. It absolutely could have been him. You all came across me with many of you. My father absolutely was arrested on some BS that they ended up not even being able to make stick. And you absolutely saw me outside of the jail having to advocate for his medical care because they're refusing to do just the basics. And it's up to us. I put my link tree, as I always do. The reason that I put that is we need bodies. We need people to show up. We need people to send those emails. When you connect with me, I can get you whatever it is that you need. It's just a lot easier way in order to disseminate information. We need you to be deliberate. I know that this is streaming on my pages as well as the pages of each family member and person that was there. Be deliberate. Don't get off this live and say, oh my gosh, that's so great. Now, what are they going to do? What you take away from here is, what am I going to do in order to make a difference and in order to ensure that Courtney gets the justice that he deserves, but also the other people that don't have a family like Courtney who won't back down or who won't give up, or who don't mind coming to the table and speaking very honestly and openly and candid about the situation. Literally, their diligence is what gave Courtney a voice, because he was very fearful at first to even be able to divulge a lot of the things. It has been very clear that he knows that there's people working for him on the outside. And so that makes him more prone to be able to continue, even with all of the fear and intimidation tactics, to be honest about what's going on. What we challenge the sheriff's office with is, if we lying or if he's lying, prove us wrong. Furnish the video, not the spliced up, cut up one with no sound. Furnish the incident reports so that we can see them. Furnish the records of every officer that was involved. We want their jackets. Every officer that was involved, we want a record of all of the incident reports that they've been involved in. Let us, as the people, review those incident reports. Let us go through it. And guess what? Don't charge us. If you're really serious about justice, because one of the people I had to do the public records request was very shocked that the response they got was, we'll do a research and tell you how much it'll cost. I did not let them know that public records came out of cost, because I want people to go in without what I have to say in there. That's the call to action. You're going to get a follow-up where we're going to ask you to reach out to them. Those specific things that we're asking for, we're going to openly ask the sheriff's office for it. We want it provided to us at no cost. If you are serious about justice for this young man and changing the culture of the jail, you're going to provide the community with what it needs in order for us to come together and look at this big picture and look at our systems. Additionally, I want us to come to the table. Alachua County throws a lot of money at mental health. And it is very evident that all the money that they spend, and a lot of it's for crisis stabilization, there's a systems issue where it's not working. Come to the table, help people to create a work group that can actually find a better way to proactively address people's mental health needs. Stop looking at Shanae to do it. Shanae got way too much on her plate. It's flowing over. It is time for all of us to act. Kiki, if there's anything that you want to weigh in on as we get off, we're more opening up as we got your phone situation situated. Can you hear us, Kenny?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I just want to say I appreciate you as an advocate for all you've been doing for the community for a year. I've been gone, but I'll let you know I'm back. And it was an honor when the Courtney Smith family reached me and to take that case, because I was for 120 days. So I seen 120 days, a lot of things that bothered me, that I seen the suffering, I seen about how the officer do the mental health. I see the difference inmates still take out others. I seen all that happen when I was there. So it's personal with me. And Mr. Watson, Chef Watson, come to kind of agreement to have a better advisory board to be able to prevent the future. So it's a lot that I know Mr. Watson, he just getting it in his seat. A lot of changes got to happen in that jailhouse before somebody else be killed like my classmate and teammate. So I take that personal, because, like I say, the field, no peace with that. So, but I'm honored to represent Miss Smith, Smith and his family, and all I could do to support him on every which way line. Hey, get the job done.
Thank you. And thank you all for even taking the time to pour your hearts out and really let people know about Courtney in your story. And as I stated to you, there will be follow up with media outlets and those particular things. And Vaughn, I will touch base with you on Wednesday so you can finish crafting the call to action and the specific requests.
Okay.
You all have a good night. Good luck to you. And
Thank
you all know
you.
you're very welcome.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you to both of you all for being there for us,
Thank
support,
you.
and to advocate with us and show us the direction in which we need to go and make sure that things get done right, because it's all new to us too. It came knocking at our door. I just never thought it would be my son, but it is my son. And I just appreciate all the help that you all have been doing.
Absolutely.